Hi guys, I hope you're doing well, and in this video we're going to be discussing another paper that is October-November 21, but this is variant 3. Now some of the MCQs are actually repeated from variant 2, so I'm not going to be solving them, such as I think question 1 was also repeated. They were talking about what is an example of basic economic problem. So basic economic problem is always concerned about scarcity, that is, when your resources are limited, so A should be the answer. I think this was also repeated, by the way. Anyways, let's moving forward. Question number 2, which diagram shows an opportunity cost by movement from point X to Y? We know that opportunity cost is the next best alternative for gone, and opportunity cost can actually be shown through a PPC curve. So the answer should be C, because when you move from X to Y, you're producing more capital goods. As a result of that, consumer goods will be foregone. So basically, when you move from X to Y, I mean, you're increasing the production of capital goods by this much, and you're foregoing this many consumer goods, right? So the opportunity cost would be these many consumer goods that would be foregone in order to produce these many capital goods. Okay, so as far as answer option A is concerned, the movement from X to Y is showing that you're inefficient, that you were inefficient before at point X because you had unemployed resources, idle capacity, but when you move from X to Y, you move towards full employment. That is, you utilize all your resources, right? It's demonstrating actual growth. This is actual growth. It happens when your aggregate demand increases and you utilize more of your idle resources, idle capacity. That is why you move from X to Y. So initially at point X you were inefficient, but at now point Y you are efficient. So any point on the PPC curve, whether it is at this point or it is at this point or this point, any point on the curve represents full utilization of resources, right? As far as option B is concerned, a movement from X to Y is representing a shift in production possibility curve, and a shift in PPC, a outward shift in PPC represents potential growth, right? It represents that the productive capacity of the economy has increased, which means that the economy is now able to produce more of consumer goods as well and more of capital goods as well. And you can see that yourself. Initially, you were actually producing, let's say, capital goods 1 and consumer goods 1, and now you are actually producing more capital goods and consumer goods. You're producing consumer goods 2 and capital goods 2 as well. So capital goods and consumer goods more are produced because your PPC has shifted outwards. As far as option D is concerned, you're at point X now, but point Y is unattainable unless and until your PPC curve shifts outwards. So any point that is beyond the PPC curve is unattainable unless your PPC shifts outwards. Your PPC can also shift inwards as well. That happens due to destruction of infrastructure during times of war and all, right? So in that situation, such as the Ukraine-Russia war has resulted into massive destruction of infrastructure. Obviously, you're bombing each other. You're bombing the countries. You're destroying their infrastructure, destroying the base of the country. Definitely, your PPC, the capacity to produce goods and services, would actually shift inwards. Question 3 is a repeated question from variant 2, so you can check it out from my variant 2 solution. What is an example of public good? Public goods are those goods that are non-excludable as well as non-rivalrous. So they are non-excludable and they are non-rivalrous as well. What do you mean by non-excludable? Non-excludable means that I cannot stop anyone from using them. Non-rivalrous means that if I use them, then the same benefit that I will receive, the same benefit the other person will receive as well. So the benefit, if I use them or someone else uses them, the benefit will not diminish for me, neither it will diminish for others. So healthcare is the private good, it's not a public good, because healthcare is obviously charged and only those people who pay for healthcare will actually be able to access it. Also, the fact that healthcare is rivalrous as well, because for example, if you go to a hospital, I mean, if the doctor, so there are limited number of doctors, and the hospital can also accommodate a certain number of patients. So the first maybe 100 patients can be accommodated, the rest of them will not be accommodated, right? So that doesn't makes it a public good. So it's a private good, and private goods are basically excludable as well, and they are rivalrous as well. So what do you mean by excludable? Excludable means that only those people who pay for them will be able to use them. People who do not pay for them will not be able to use them. Hence, some people can be excluded from it who have not paid for them, because a price is charged. So whenever a price is charged for a good, you can exclude others who are not paying for it. Rivalrous means that obviously if you're using it, the benefit to others will fall. Similarly, if I'm having a chocolate and I eat half of it, and now the benefit for you is not of the full chocolate, you can only be able to eat half of it, because half of the benefit I have taken it, right? As far as streetlights is concerned, streetlight is a public good because they are non-excludable and non-rivalrous as well. I cannot stop you from using the streetlights. Neither if I am using the streetlight, the benefit for you will also not reduce or diminish as well. You will get the same light benefit as much I will be getting. As far as unemployment benefits are concerned, these are not public goods because not everyone gets unemployment benefits. Only those who deserve it get it. So in that sense, yes, you can exclude people. Vaccinations are also private goods. They are not public goods because you need to pay for the vaccinations. Even if vaccinations are, let's say, free of charge given by the government, they are given at free of cost, right? Such as the COVID vaccination. So, but obviously, it's at certain point in time. I mean, there are only limited number of vaccinations available to it. You can't, you can't really give vaccinations to unlimited number of people who exist in this planet, right? Question number 5 says, why does a government provide certain goods and services in a mixed economic system? We all know what a mixed economic system is, where private and public sector both allocate their resources. The private sector allocates resources based on demand and supply, while the public sector allocates resources based on what it thinks should be produced rather than what the consumer wants them to produce. Okay, so as far as question 5 is concerned, the answer should be no. A should not be the answer. The government considers the private. No, the government does not consider the private cost and benefit. In fact, the government considers the social cost and social benefits. The government provides goods to prevent the development of monopolies. Yes, the government does provide goods to prevent the development. The government is not actually trying to prevent the development. I mean, not all monopolies are bad, right? So we can't really assume that all monopolies will be bad. But yes, the government is not trying to prevent the development of monopolies. The government is trying, as in the government is trying that the monopoly should not exploit. So the government provides public goods because private firms cannot charge for them. Definitely, the private firms cannot charge for them. So it's unprofitable for firms, private sector firms, and that is why the government kicks in and the government steps in and provides the public goods, because the private sector will not provide it because there's no profit in providing them because of the free rider problem, right? Because the free rider problem states that, I mean, if let's say, because the point is that if I, let's say, end up putting a street light outside my house, then everyone will benefit from it because it's non-excludable, right? I can't exclude people. So I mean, there's no point. Then only one street light will be bought by me, and the rest will use it, right? And so there's no profit in selling it. I mean, I can't really flex the fact that I've bought a street light. Look at this really cool street light I've bought. I mean, this is from a XYZ famous brand. I've imported this street light from abroad. You can't really flex about it. So it's a street light, right? It's a public good. Also, the fact that the free rider problem states that if I want to put a street light outside my house, I'll be like, okay, fine, I'm not going to put it. Let him put it. Let my neighbor put it. My neighbor will think, okay, let my next door neighbor put it. Everyone thinks Everyone thinks like this. Then no one will be able to act. Then no one will end up putting the street light, right? So the street light will not be put by anyone, right? No one will install that street light. So the government has to do it because of the nature of the public good. The nature is such that they are excludable and rivalrous. So remember that goods that are excludable and rivalrous, I mean, the nature is such that there's no point in doing business for them. So there's no point in doing a business for a good that is non-excludable and non-rivalrous. That is why people do business and make profits for goods that are rivalrous as well as excludable. Anyways, so question number 6 states that what is a microeconomic decision? This is a very easy question. Gas firm reducing its prices is a microeconomic decision. Central bank, I mean, it's a monetary authority talking about interest rates. These are all a government increasing the national minimum wage rates, a government increasing taxes. These are all monetary policies. National minimum wage rate is a supply side measure. Government increasing taxes is a fiscal measure. A is a monetary policy. So B is the right answer. Question 6, B for boy. Question number 7. The diagram shows a shift in supply curve. So the supply curve is shifting to the right. What is the cause of this shift? Definitely supply curve shifts to the right when the cost of production falls. So in that sense, A should be the right answer, a decrease in the cost. Whenever the cost of production goes down, it makes it more. The firms are willing and able to produce more, and that is why the supply curve shifts outwards. It represents that the firms are able to produce more at the same price. So if this is the price of the product, so at price initially they were willing and able to produce and sell Q1 units, but now they're willing and able to sell Q2 units at the same price. That is what supply curve outward shift means. Question number 8 states the diagram shows a demand curve for rice, so the price is actually going down. I think, yeah, the price is going up. as the price increases from 1 to 1.5. So the price is going up, and obviously the quantity demanded has to go down, because that's what the law of demand states as the inverse relation. So we need to calculate the PET. The PET formula is percentage change in quantity demanded divided by the percentage change in price. For the percentage change in quantity demanded, you'll use the formula new minus old upon old into 100. New for quantity demanded, new for price as well. So what is the new quantity demanded? The new quantity demanded is 27, the old quantity demanded is 30. So 27 minus 30 divided by old 30 times 100, and then what is the new price? The new price is 1.5. 1.5 minus 1 over 1 times 100. So let's calculate these figures. I'll calculate it with you. The first figure comes to 10%, so the percentage change in quantity demanded is minus 10% over the percentage change in price is how much? That is, let me calculate. I'm actually calculating. That is why I've paused. In the meantime, if you're bored, that's why I've paused, go and subscribe to my channel and share it as well. Okay, so the percentage change in price is increasing by 50%. So I think, I don't know if I've calculated it right or wrong. Just a second, let me confirm. Yeah, it's 50%, right? So the price is increasing by 50% and the quantity demanded is falling by 10%. So the answer should be percent gets cancelled. 10 over 50 is what? 10 over 50 is 0.2. So the answer is minus 0.2. You ignore the minus sign. 0.2 is less than 1. Definitely, it's inelastic. The question is asking what is the price elasticity of demand. So it's less than 1. So the answer should be C, because 0.2 is less than 1. Okay. So that is how you. This was an easy question, by the way. Question number 8 is C. By the way, if PED equals to 0, it means perfectly inelastic, and the diagram for that would be drawn like a vertical straight line. If PED equals to 1, it means unitary elastic. It's drawn like a rectangular hyperbola. And this means that the revenue for the firm and expenditure for the firm stays the same, because the reason is that the quantity demanded changes by exactly the same percent as the change in price. So if price is rising by 10%, quantity demanded falls by 10%. If price falls by 15%, quantity demanded rises by 15%. And that is why the value of PD equals to 1. And because of that, the revenue for the firm and expenditure for the consumer stays the same. Less than 1 means it's inelastic. It's drawn like a steep. The slope of an inelastic curve is steep. Greater than 1 means elastic. The slope is flat, like this. If PED equals to infinite, it means perfectly elastic, which is drawn like this. It means perfectly elastic. That is, everything the consumer is willing and able to buy an infinite amount of quantity at a price of P. Question 9 states, which the table shows the output of cakes from 4 bakeries. Which bakery has the highest labor productivity? I already told you in my previous video as well, labor productivity is a measure of efficiency. Output is not efficiency. Output per input is efficiency. So labor productivity is measuring the ratio of output to input ratio, right? So what is the output? It's telling us that 40 cakes are produced per day in bakery A, and 10 hours. So 10, if the labor gives 10 hours, they end up producing 40 cakes. If in bakery B, if you give 40 hours, you produce 640 cakes. So now let's calculate the labor productivity. How will you calculate the labor productivity? What you will do is that you will divide the output by the input that you are giving in. So 40 cakes are produced divided by the 10 hours that you are giving. So it gives us 4 cakes per hour. Then what you do is that you divide 640 by 40. So if you divide 640 by 40, the answer is 16 cakes per hour. Then you divide 750 by 50. So the answer is 15 cakes per hour. And then 500 by 100, you get 5 cakes per hour. Now you have actually, by dividing it by input, what you have done is that you've calculated the output per hour for every bakery. And now you can actually end up seeing that, bakery B has the highest level of labor productivity, because as compared to bakery A, C, and D, bakery B is producing the highest number of cakes per hour. So that is what labor productivity is telling you. It's a measure of efficiency, which means that bakery B is more efficient. Maybe it's I don't know, the workers are specialized, workers are more trained, educated, more skilled, division of labor is taking place, or maybe they're using efficient, highest technological advanced machinery. So the answer should be B for boy. I hope you've understood this. Moving on to the next question. The next question should be question number 10. Okay. The question number 10 states, what is an advantage of labor intensive? and an advantage of capital intensive. Labor intensive is when you're using more labor than machines, and capital intensive is when you're using more machines than labor. So labor intensive than capital intensive. So the advantage for labor intensive would be that each item can be individually made. Yes, this makes sense. Average cost of, yeah. So A should be the answer. Why? Because it says that advantage of labor intensive production is the advantage of labor intensive production would be the reason why you are doing labor intensive production, and that is that each item can be individually made, which is actually right, which means that each item is actually customized according to what the customer wants, because it's tailor made, right? So since each item is individually made, so let's assume an artist, he's actually hand painting every painting, or he's making according to what you want him to make, right? So an artist is an example, he's doing it entirely himself. So as far as the labor intensive production is concerned, the labor would be customizing things according to what the customer standards are. So yeah, that's an advantage. For the capital intensive, yeah, capital intensive, we know that, the more machines you have, the more technologically advanced you are, the more heavy machinery and equipment you have, the more large the firm would be, and the lower will be your average cost, because you can benefit from economies of scale. Your average cost would go down, as because capital intensive production, we know that the machines are expensive, so there is a huge fixed cost of machines involved, and when you scale up your output, that is when you increase your output, your average fixed cost goes down, because we know that the average fixed cost equals to fixed cost over output. I explained this in my previous video as well, in variant 2 for the same paper. It's on the playlist. And what happens is that if you're using a machine, let's suppose you bought a machine for $1 million, and in the first month you ended up producing, let's suppose, 100,000 units. In the second month you ended up producing maybe 200,000 units. So what I'm saying is that each time you're producing more and more units, you're actually spreading up more and more of your fixed cost over the output. So that is why your average fixed cost goes down. And not only this, but capital intensive production also allows the labor cost to be low, in the sense that it allows the labor to be productive. So the labor is actually handling the machines quite well, and they are also productive and efficient. So labor cost in that sense also, maybe the number of hours worked goes down, and that reduces the hourly wage cost, and that brings the average cost down. So A should be the correct answer. For question number 11, the says the market equilibrium wage rate is 10. What explains why the wage rate actually paid would be 12? So definitely it would be a minimum wage if this is your demand and supply, and if this is your market wage rate, let's suppose W1, but you end up paying the minimum wage, which is above the market wage rate. So definitely the answer should be, the answer should be 11, should be B. The government sets a minimum wage of 12 per hour. Okay, understood? Remember that minimum wages are always set above the equilibrium. If the minimum wage is set below the equilibrium, it is ineffective, and the market wage rate would prevail. If the equilibrium is set, let's suppose, below the equilibrium, if the minimum wage rate is set below the equilibrium, right? In that case, the market wage rate will prevail. Question number 12 says a firm imports 20 high quality bicycles into the US at a cost of 3,000 each. It sells them, making a profit of 1,000. So what is profit formula? Profit equals to total revenue minus total cost. Total cost is basically fixed cost plus variable cost. Total revenue is price multiplied by quantity sold. So price multiply, so basically 20 bicycles are imported at a cost of 3,000. 3,000 is the total cost. We don't know the revenue, that is X, and the profit is 1,000 per bicycle. So 1,000, oh, by the way, it's the cost is 3,000, not in total, it's 3,000 each. So the total cost should be 3,000 times the number of units bought, multiplied by 20. The profit is 1,000 per bicycle, so it should be 1,000 times 20 equals to, yeah, so you just find the value of X and you can calculate that easily. And this should come up to how much? This should be 20,000 equals to X minus 60,000. So the value of X should be how much? 60 plus 80, that is 60 plus 20, that is 80. So your total revenue comes to 80,000. That's your total revenue. But they're asking about the average revenue. Now, what is average revenue? Average revenue stands for revenue per unit. How many units are you selling? You're selling 20 units. So the formula would be total revenue divided by the number of units that you're selling. Not the number of units that you're producing, but the number of units you're selling. So you're earning a revenue of 80,000 by selling 20 units. So what is the revenue per unit? It's 4,000. So the answer should be D, 4,000. So the answer to question number 12 is D. Okay guys, are you following? If you're following, then please do mention in the comments that you're following. I love those comments. I love those flattery comments that you give me. I read them all, and I'm really thankful to you. Question number 13 says the diagram shows the total cost, total fixed cost, and total variable cost. Which costs are shown? So this is your fixed cost. When a fixed cost is always shown like a horizontal line that indicates that irrespective of the number of units that you're producing, so as you can see that you're increasing your output, but your fixed cost stays constant, right? It's the same. Your fixed cost is not rising, right? Your variable cost always starts from the origin. So this is your variable cost, because at 0 units, obviously your variable cost would be 0. And as you increase your output, the variable cost starts increasing. As far as total cost is concerned, it always starts from the point of the fixed cost. The simple reason is that your at 0 units, remember at 0 units, your total cost would be equal to the fixed cost, because at 0 units, your variable cost would be 0. But so total cost is variable cost plus fixed cost, right? So at 0 units, you will not incur any variable cost, but at 0 units, you will definitely incur a fixed cost. So your total cost would actually be equal to the fixed cost. That is why it starts from the point of the fixed cost. So this is your total cost. So as far as X is concerned, X is your variable cost. X is your variable cost, total variable cost. Y is your total fixed cost, and W is your total cost. So that makes B the answer. Understood, guys? So 13 answer should be B for boy. 12 was David, 13 was 12 was David, 13 was boy, 14, let's start 14. The table shows the output and the total cost of a firm with 4 production methods A to D. Which method causes diseconomies of scale as the firm expands production? What is diseconomies of scale? It is when your average cost starts to rise. So we actually need to calculate the average cost. The formula for average cost is total cost divided by output. So you have the number of units given, that is the output given, and you have the total cost given. So basically, let's consider the first production method, that is method A. So we need to calculate the average cost, right? So let's calculate the average cost. So you divide 8,000 of total cost divided by the output of 1,000. So the average cost comes to 8. So if you're producing 1,000 units and if you're using production method A, you end up with a cost of 8,000. So the average cost would be 8. Here your average cost would be 10,000 divided by 2,000. That is, your average cost would be 5. So your average cost is going down, and then 12 divided by 3, your average cost goes down. So actually you're benefiting from economies of scale from 8 to 5 and then 5 to 4. So this shouldn't be the answer. This is not diseconomies of scale at all. For diseconomies of scale to happen, your average cost must go up. As far as option B is concerned, the average cost for the first is 8, then the average cost 14 to over 2, the average cost falls to 7, and then 27 to 3, it actually goes up 9. So this can be the answer. Let's see the other one as well. The average cost would be 10, 16 over 2, the average cost is 16 over 2, the average cost is 8, 21 over 3, the average cost is 7. So option C is not the answer, because there's an entire range of output, the average cost is going down. Here it's 10, the average cost is 10, the average cost, so here there is just average cost is neither decreasing nor increasing. So B is the correct answer, because your average cost initially goes down and then it actually increases. So definitely from 2,000 to 3,000 units, you can see that your average cost is going up. Which method causes diseconomies of scale if the firm expands production from 1,000 to 3,000? So yeah, if it expands production from 1,000 to 3,000 for the first extra 1,000 units, that is for the first, the fact that from 1,000 it produces a next set of 2,000 units and then a next set of 3,000 units. So initially, yeah, it falls from 8 to 7, but then after 2,000 units, diseconomies of scale sets in. So answer B is the correct answer. 15 is saying a clothing manufacturer expands by taking over a clothing industry. So taking over a merger. Merger is it's takeover, or a merger is basically a form of integration or a form of expansion. Which type of merger is it? Your clothing manufacturer is taking over a clothing retailer, right? So this should be vertical forward. By the way, let's see what horizontal integration is. Horizontal integration is when there's a merger or a takeover between two firms who are actually in the same industry and they're operating at the same stage of production. Let's say two newspaper companies are merging with each other, right? Vertical integration occurs when two firms are at different stage of production. Obviously, they are in the same industry, but they are at different stage of production. Let's say a newspaper company is merging with the firm that produces paper, right? So you're actually merging with your source of raw material. You're actually merging with your source of raw material. So initially you used to purchase the raw material from that firm, but now you're actually merging with them. So that raw material firm becomes you. It becomes your firm then, right? That cuts down your cost. And vertical forward is when the firm merges with another firm, but in the next stage of production. That is, maybe a firm is producing, let's say, coffee beans, right? Let's say Nescafe. and you end up buying a chain of coffee shops. Let's say Nescafe produces coffee beans, they could buy more coffee shops then, in that sense, so that they can sell their own beans in that coffee. So they end up buying 10 shops in the city, so that they can only, those coffee shops were initially selling coffee beans of other brands as well, but now no, they will only sell coffee beans for Nescafe. Okay, so it's an example of vertical forward integration. So 15 should be C, and C is for Charlie. So yeah. Okay guys, the next question 16 says, which economic situation exists when there are 2 consecutive quarters, that is 6 months of negative economic growth? Negative economic growth basically means that your real GDP, that is your output, is basically falling. So economic growth is basically increasing GDP, right? Increasing real output, real GDP. But when you're talking about negative economic growth, you're saying that your real GDP is going down. And your real GDP could go down either because your aggregate demand is going down, or it could go down because your aggregate supply is going down, right? So basically, when you're talking about a situation where your negative economic growth is persisting due to 2 consecutive quarters, it's indicating a sign of a recession, because a recession is a period where your aggregate demand is going down for a consecutive period of 2 quarters or 6 months. A lot of students think that recession is when your aggregate demand falls, but no, a recession occurs only, economic theory says that a recession occurs only when your aggregate demand goes down for a continuous period of 2 consecutive quarters, that is 6 months. So yes, the answer should be 16D for David, that it's indicating a recession, and that is why your real GDP is going down for 2 consecutive quarters. Question 17 says, why might measures to reduce unemployment may also make inflation rise? So yes, we know that there is a conflict between the macroeconomic objective of reducing unemployment and reducing inflation, because when you reduce unemployment, your inflation goes up, and that is because of your expansionary demand side policies. So if the state is basically coming up with expansionary demand side policies of boosting aggregate demand with the aim of reducing unemployment, so that your cyclical unemployment, that is your demand deficit unemployment, goes down, and firms basically hire more labor to produce more output, that could result into demand pull inflationary pressures. So basically what will happen is that if you come up with expansionary demand side policies such as expansionary monetary policy, where you reduce the interest rate and you increase your money supply, that would actually result into aggregate demand rising, firms will hire more labor, and that would create demand pull inflation. Or you could say that the government could come up with expansionary fiscal policy, where the government reduces the taxes or it increases the government spending. In either case, your aggregate demand would go up, and that would be result into demand pull inflationary pressures, because you can see the diagram. The diagram says that if you increase your aggregate demand shifts outwards from 81 to 82. It results into demand pull inflationary pressures from P1 to P2. So all those and although yes, this will reduce unemployment, you can clearly see, because what will happen is that when aggregate demand goes up, your aggregate supply would extend, right? Because firms would hire more labor to create more real GDP and create more output. That would reduce unemployment, but at the same time, it would create inflationary pressures as well. So 17 should be B. They increase demand, because these measures increase aggregate demand but result into inflationary pressures. Okay. Question 18 says, which change affecting an economy's labor market promotes economic growth? So, okay, fine. So, increasing trade union strike action would actually reduce economic growth, because output would be, it would hamper the output, and because when the unions are on a strike, it would reduce GDP since output would not be produced. Lowering the age of retirement, not at all. This shouldn't be the answer, because when you reduce the retirement age, what is going to happen is that people will be retired early, and people will exit the labor market at a much earlier age. So it should actually reduce economic growth, not increase it. Reducing the training of workers should also is also not going to boost economic growth. In fact, it will reduce economic growth, because the more workers are trained and skilled, the more economic growth there should be. So it's the opposite effect. So answer should be D, removing immigration controls. Immigration means people will come in your economy from outside. So workers are coming in your economy in search of better jobs or so. So if you reduce the immigration policies for people and make it easier for people to maybe get visas and come and settle in your country in search of better work, so that would actually increase the country's GDP and promote more economic growth. So the answer should be D for David, 18. Question 19 is again a repeated question from variant 2, so I've already solved it in variant 2. You can go and check from there. It's on my channel playlist as well. Which statement relating to supply side policies is correct? They aim to increase aggregate demand. No. Supply side policies are aimed at basically increasing the aggregate supply, right? And they are divided into short run aggregate supply side policies versus long run aggregate supply side policies. Short run aggregate supply side policies basically result into positive supply shocks and these policies include the aim is to reduce the cost in the economy temporarily so that your real GDP increases, and such as giving more subsidies to key industries, strategic industries, so that the cost reduces, and that results into it reduces the cost in the industry, and then it reduces the inflationary pressures as well, the cost push inflationary pressures as well, and increases real GDP. You can also reduce one of the policies is to reduce indirect taxes as well. And long run aggregate supply side policies are aimed at increasing the productive capacity of the economy, such as through investing in infrastructure, education, development, healthcare, through more favorable labor reforms, etc. So the answer should be B. They aim to increase the long run capacity of the economy, depending upon whether they are short run or long run. But yeah, as far as the long run capacity of the economy is concerned, we're talking about the long run supply side policies. They aim to work in the short term. No. They aim to reduce cyclical unemployment will reduce due to expansionary demand side policy. So this is not the answer as well. So 20 should be boy. Question 21 says, what is always indicated by an increase in the CPI? Increase in consumer price index is basically a price index that considers the average basket of good a consumer buys, and then it measures the prices, and then it converts them into an index number, and then it we can calculate the percentage change in the index, in the weighted price index, and that results into measuring the rate of inflation basically. So as far as 21 is concerned, the answer should be an increase in spend. No. An increase in living standards, not at all. An increase in the average cost of living, because the CPI, the consumer price index, is basically giving us the inflation, right? So by measuring the CPI, we're actually measuring inflation, and when we measure inflation, we're actually trying to find out the cost of living, because higher inflation means higher cost of living, and it reduces your purchasing power. So we are actually measuring the increase in the average cost of living in the economy by measuring the CPI and coming up with then rate of inflation. Question number 22 has been removed, so we move to question 23. Again, question 23 was also repeated from the variant 2, so that's already solved there. Question 24 says, what could reduce poverty? Greater economic growth definitely will reduce poverty, so I think this should be the answer. But let's see, less spending on education would actually increase the poverty. More regressive taxation. Regressive taxation means that regressive taxation would actually increase the tax burden on the poor as compared to the rich. It should actually increase poverty, not reduce it. Privatization of hospitals would make it expensive for the poor people to afford health. It would actually increase poverty, not reduce it. So the answer should be A. Greater economic growth would automatically result into higher GDP and higher incomes, national incomes, and would automatically reduce poverty for the people. Question 25 says, the table shows information about 4 countries, country A to D. What country is most likely to have a falling population? Remember guys, population will fall when either the birth rate goes down, so birth rate goes down, or the death rate goes up, right? The population size would fall because of a falling birth rate, or a rise in death rate, or basically a fall in your net inward migration, or you could say, or there is a rise in your net outward migration. So right, so either your net inward migration falls, that is net inward migration would actually fall when more people are exiting the country as compared to more people coming in the country. So if emigration is more than immigration, definitely the size of the population will go down, right? Remember that. So in case of emigration exceeding immigration, it's resulting into a net outward migration. So these are the 3 factors that affect the population size in any country. So according to question 25, part A, the first column talks about access to a healthy diet. So healthy diet, if the healthy diet is basically going down, that would definitely result into a falling population. So answers should either be A or B. So we cross out C and D. We don't even look at it. It's ridiculous. I mean, it's not relevant for us. And cost of bringing up the children, if the cost of bringing up the children is actually rising, that will result into falling birth rates, because you'll be careful before you come up with children, because you will be like, how will we take care of their expenses and all. So cost of bringing up the children will rise in the economy. People will be careful about producing more children, and as a result of that, that makes B the right answer. So access to healthy diet is falling, and cost of bringing the children is basically increasing. Question 26 is again the similar question that was repeated in variant 2. You guys can check from there. Question 27 says Malaysia and Indonesia specialize in the production of palm oil. Remember that when countries specialize in the production of something, they become dependent on it. They become dependent on its domestic production and consumption demands, as well as because they are investing all of their factors of production into and being dependent on their GDP, on their exports, and their incomes on by specializing in a certain product. Usually, countries specialize in those products in which they have an absolute or comparative advantage, right? So as far as this MCQ is concerned, I mean, as far as the specialization of countries is concerned, because of this dependency, what happens is that if you specialize into something, you specialize in goods in which you are more competitive at. Your factors of production are more skilled into it, or you can produce them at a lower average cost, or you can produce them at a lower opportunity cost, let's say. So if you specialize in certain goods, let's say if you specialize in good A, so you will produce more of good A and then trade it with another country that is not good at producing good A, and maybe that's good at producing good B. So you'll export good A to them and you'll import good B from them. In this way, international trade will take place. In this way, you will be better at producing good A, so you will produce it at a lower comparative cost. Not only that, you will be able to satisfy your domestic demand for good A as well, and as well export the surplus to other countries, and that will also help you generate export revenues and improve your current account. And then at the same time, you can import good B from a country that is better at producing good B, and it can produce it at a lower cost, and it would save your time and your money as well, because otherwise if you would have produced good B, you would have ended up producing it in less quantities and at a much higher cost. So you are actually saving your resources in that sense, and doing justice to your country by saving money for it. And otherwise you would have so because you will be in a better position now, because now you can actually import good B at a lower rate, at a cheaper cost from another country, and satisfy your domestic demand not only for good A but for good B as well. But the point is, what happens is that you become more reliant on trade now, because you can't produce good B yourself. I mean, you are not producing good B yourself, so you're actually relying on trade with other countries for other goods, because you are only producing good A now. You've specialized in good A, you're producing good A, and as far as good B or good C is concerned, you're importing it from other countries who have a more competitive advantage in producing them. So 27 should be C, should be the correct answer. 28, again, it's a repeated question from variant 2. You can check from there. Question 29 says, what is the reason for trade protection? We know what trade protection is. It is basically your trade barriers. The reason is to protect your domestic industry and to improve your current account position, because you are importing a lot, and that is being a threat to domestic firms. So the answer to 29 should be it's basically it should be A, to reduce a deficit on the current account of the BOP, because if you impose trade protection like tariffs and quotas, it would reduce your imports, it would reduce your import expenditures, and when import expenditures would go down, your current account position would improve, right? So it would reduce the deficit on the current account. As far as 30 is concerned, what is an immediate? Again, this is same again a repeated question from variant 2. I have given a detailed explanation for it as well. So I think that completes our paper. That is variant 3, and now we'll move on to the June 2020 paper. So I'll see you all around, guys, in the next video. I hope you enjoyed this video and understood it as well. Please mention in the comments, and do share your feedback and share it with your peers and friends as well. I'll see you all around in the next video with another past paper solution. Until then, guys, take care.